Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, welcome back with me, Miss Yuliyana. Today we're going to tell you about history of English literature. Let's check. And now we're jump in the next slide. The first question is, what did you learn from this class? And in the next slide I will explain to you some material that I have learned from this class. The first one is 18th century era. The first point is characteristics of the 18th century era. First one is, in the 18th century was to be the era of satire, with witty and sarcastic writer criticizing parts of society, being clever with the English language and the rhyme in poetry. In this era, the court was weakened from the Enlightenment and from the scientific view of society, leaving writers with some space to criticize part and social standards of society. The second one is in the 18th century, Industrial Revolution brought major changes and also major characters of this age. The Industrial Revolution started from 1760 until 1840. Previously, economy was a progress, and the people were living in the village, and their life was rustic. And the third one is 18th century, also the age of religious and political controversies. Like political controversies in this age, there was not total peace and stability. And the last one is prose occupied the front position and more important than poetry and drama. And the next one is characteristic of literary works in this era. The first one is literary works were influenced by French writers, especially by Boileau and Rapin, who insisted on the precise methods of writing poetry and who professed to have discovered the rules in the classics of Horace and Aristotle. Writers followed the classicism of the ancients and writer or French writers, which was taken in a narrow sense to imply final place and external elegance. And the next one is the novel in this era was a semi-content Roman novel to a rapidly increasing reading material in this era, which is the novels is widely favored by high-class women. As a result, many changes in the plot and ideas of the heroic tragedy in the novel, perhaps the two most. And the next one is the famous author and the masterpiece work. This is Alexander Pope, he was born in London 1688 until 1744. He was an 18th century English poet. He was known to write in the form of a heroic couplet and also known because his satire work and handmade Homer's translation. Pope carefully cultivation of poetic technique, his concern with prescience and purport, and his ambition determined both to divine and refine the taste and ideas of his age, render him more than an exclusively satirical poet. His first and become his masterpiece work is an essay on criticism, which published in 1711. Its brilliantly placed epigram, like little learning is a dangerous thing. To err is human, to forgive divine, which have become part of the proverbial heritage of the language. And the next one is, what do you know about this era? In 18th century was broadly divided into two categories. First half of it was called Augustan Age, and the second half was known as the Age of Sensibility. And what is the lesson learned do you have after learning this era? The theorem of an era, it depends on who has the leader and how the leader exercises their authority, the quality of the community, and also some of the major elements influencing the era. And the second material is a Romantic era, which is from 1785 until 1830. And let's start with the Romantic era. And here there are characteristics of this era. Romantic era, which is the profound appreciation of the nature, beauty, emotion, human personality, and also mental potential, and focus on inner struggle. The new view of artists as a very individual creator. Spirit was more important than adherence to formal rules and traditional procedures, obsessive interest in people culture, ethnic, and in this era has a lot to do with exotic things, mysterious, and other things. And here there are characteristics of literary work at this era. First one is emotion. When we read some work at this era, we will see all the feelings that explain, including the romantic love, fear, sadness, loneliness, and others. And all of that things, most romantic poetry and also prose were easy to read and connect each other. The second one is nature, where nature was played a whole role and also the strong symbol in a literary work at this era. Romantic poets give their own deep description about nature and it is powerful and wild qualities. For example, as in the final stanza of To Autumn by John Keats. And the last one is emphasis on aesthetic beauty, where romantic literature also explores the theme of aesthetic beauty, not just of nature but of people as well, especially woman beauty. Writers praise women of the Romantic era for their natural loveliness. The classic example of this characteristic is from George Garden or Lord Byron's poem, which is She Walks in Beauty. And we are in the famous author and the masterpiece work at this era. Here there is William Blake, which is he was born in on 28th November 1757 until 12 August 1827. He was an English poet, painter, and also printmaker. He was considered of one of the greatest romantic poets, leaving a legacy of memorable poetry. He combined lofty mysticism, imagination, and vision with an uncompromising awareness of the harsh realities of life. And one of his masterpiece work was The Tiger, which is and what do you know about this era? Romantic era or Romanticism was an artistic, literary, musical, and also intellectual movement that organized in Europe towards the end of the 18th century. And what is the lesson learned do you have after learning this era? This is the balance of the community or social life was according to how the government was running. In this era, many people just busy with their respective affairs. And the next one is we're going in the Victorian era, which is from 1830 until 1901. And here characteristic of Victorian era. One of the characteristics of Victorian era was paradox like all age, but the various paradox in this era were very disturbing many people in that time and more struck than who faced their ancestors. Many individual Victorians saw the family as an agent of oppression and as the chief vehicle of compassion, conformity. High Victorian was known as an era of conflicting explanation theories of scientific, economic confidence, and also social, spiritual feminism. And here characteristic of literary work at this era. One of the characteristics of literary work was at the time, poetry was more sensation rather than reflection. Like Note by Helen argued, he was created works in which his life consists in the emotion which were immediately consonant with sensation, and it shows the nature of society at this era, with all conflicts and disharmony that still continued. And the next one is the famous actor and his masterpiece work. There is a Charles Dickens, he was born in 7 February 1812 and until 9 June in 1870. He was a British novelist who generally considered the greatest of the Victorian period. Dickens nearly became a professional actor. He began contributing stories and descriptive essays to magazine and newspaper, and here his masterpiece work, which is Pickwick Paper, and this is become his first and also masterpiece work novel. And the next one is, what do you know about this era? Victorian was an era of British history spanning the 60-30 year reign of Queen Victoria. The era saw British Empire grow to become the first global industrial power, producing much of the world's coal, steel, textile, and iron. And the next one is, what is the lesson learned do you have after learn this era? I can take one lesson that life was hard unless you were rich, because in that time everyone, including children, had to work because food was expensive and they have to work for produce textiles. And the next one is, we are going in Edwardian era, which is from 1901 until 1910. And let's check. And here characteristics of this era. The first one is dangerous beauty of female. One of the example was a face blessing, where some women at this era having extremely pale fair complexion was important to women in this era. And the second one is class and society. The Edwardian era was an era during which the British very right economic and social change created an environment in which there was more social mobility. And the third one is fashion. During the Edwardian era, women wore a very thick corset or body size and dresses in long skirts. The Edwardian era was the last time women wore corset in everyday life. And the last one is arts. This era, criticized by its own unique article style, Art Nouveau had a particularly strong influence. Artists were influenced by the development of the automobile and electricity. And the next one is characteristic of literary work this time. The first one is realistic and naturalistic, and the second one is more instant, social, and also political. The third one is literary. At this era saw the amalgamation of imagism, and the last one is realism and also futurism. And we're going in the famous actor and his masterpiece work. Here there is a Joseph Conrad, which is he was born on December 3, 1857. He is a Polish British writer, respected as one of the greatest novelists to write in the English language. He wrote stories and novels, many with analytical settings. This is his masterpiece work, Heart of Darkness. This is a novel by Polish-British novelist Joseph Conrad. This is about a narrated voyage up the Congo River into the Congo Free State in the so-called Heart of Africa. The narrator tells his story to friends aboard a boat anchored on the river Thames. And now we are in the modernism era, which is start from 1914 until 1945. And here there are some characteristics of this era. The first one is industrialization, second one is war, third one is science and technology, and the fourth one is enlightenment, and the next one is broadcast media and also liberty. And here there is a famous author and his masterpiece work. There is Ezra Pound, which is he was born in United States but moved to the Europe and London as a young man. He was one of the famous writers from the modernism era, which is he broke in his writing a style of making people visualize the scene to an extent in which they believe that they were there. And here the Countess as his masterpiece work, which is literary figures from modernism era. This poem runs to nearly 1,000 pages and also accomplished by using literal meanings instead of symbolism. This poem also contained with critical upon the time social problems. And now we are in the 20th century era, which is start from 1901 until 2000. And here are characteristics of literary work at 20th century era. The first one is novel. Novel of 20th century's era were written at that time when there was a confident instability in British society. But the 20th century novels are influenced by the change in beliefs and political ideas after the events of the First World War and the disappearance of the British Empire. And the second one is drama. The 20th century era denoted the split between folks and frills, drama and serious work. Following in the footsteps of many other European countries, the new direction was political, satirical, and rebellious. Common themes in the new early 20th century drama were political, reflecting the unease or rebellion of the workers against the states, philosophical, delving into the who and why of human life and existence. And the last one is fragmented structure, which is imitate the feeling of how time is truly experienced subjectively. And this is famous author and masterpiece work at 20th century era. There is Scott Fitzgerald in full Francis Scott Key Fitzgerald was born in September 24, 1896 and in Estelle Paul, Minnesota, United States, and died December 21 in 1940 in Hollywood, California. He was American short story writer and novelist famous for his depictions of the Jazz Age. And this is his masterpiece work, The Great Gatsby, perhaps the most searching fable of the American dreams ever written. This glittering novel of the Jazz Age paints an unforgettable. And now we are in the last era, which is 21st century era, which is start from 2000 until now. And here there are characteristics of literary work at 21st century era. The first one is drama. Drama in 21st century related with the politic in the politically changed early years of the 21st century. Second one is poetry. Poetry in 21st century has a flourish with some poets becoming very significant public figures. And the third one is novel. Novel in 21st century astonishingly presents both about the violence and about some of its roots and resonance, like in the novels is a Big My Did It and also Run Away by Christopher Brockmeyer. And here there is a famous author and masterpiece work, William Ford Gibson, which is born on March 17, 1984. He was an American-Canadian speculative fiction writer and essayist widely credited with pioneering the science fiction subgenre known as cyberpunk. Beginning his writing career in the late 1970s, his early works were near-future stories that explore the effect of technology. And this is his masterpiece work, which is Neuromancer. Neuromancer is a novel in 1984 by William Gibson that launched the cyberpunk movement within the science fiction literary genre. This novel tells about an employee computer hacker who is hired by a mysterious employer called Ermite. And the next question is, what was the lesson learned of this class? There are some things that I learned from this course, which is History of English Literature class during this semester. The first, which is learning and understanding what was learned, is very important to help me at least master some of the material that I have studied. The second is, by studying independently, I can more diligent to find out about additional material and make me not just dependent solely on the material that provided by the lecture, and I can more free to find out some information about the material that I learned. And next one is, with this class I can more able to assignment according to the targets that had set by the lecturer, so I can use the remaining time to doing others assignment. And the last one is, of course, I can more creative and innovative. And the last question is, what is the next plan after joining this class? My next plan after joining this History of English Literature class is to further explore what I have learned either by reading many sources or watching YouTube that discuss the material for one semester in this course. And also developing my new hobby of editing videos, both through video editing application and directly in Microsoft Word. And the material is still in the form of the History of English Literature, or it could be the other material, because during this semester I learned a lot about editing and made some interesting videos. And of course, it was an extraordinary experience and knowledge me personally. And that's all about this course, and thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.